we really we simply wanted to give a few words about the Young Academy Ireland and what we do and what's our work. So the idea behind this organization is to really bring together early career researchers and innovators coming from very different fields and very different disciplines to work collaboratively on the benefits of society. And so this is an organization that was created in 2023, if I'm not mistaken, and that has now 60 members. And so, as I said, these members are from a variety of institutions across all the island of Ireland, and not only from universities and colleges, but also from organizations. And they are from very different fields. So as you can see on the right, that we have people from archaeology, from computer science, from economics, from history, from law, from physics, etc., etc. And so I think one of the strengths of this organization is that it really brings together people from various disciplines. We work under the umbrella of the Royal Irish Academy. And so although we are under the umbrella of the Royal Irish Academy, we are independent in the kind of activities that we want to implement, although we do have to report with them. And so we are independent, but of course there are some collaboration between the Young Academy Ireland and the Royal Irish Academy. And so there are collaboration both at the individual level between members, but also at the group level where we shared initiatives and activities. And so as part of the Young Academy Ireland, we have a strategic plan, which is built on 5 different pillars. And so these are really the kind of topics that we really try to work on and to improve on. One of them is sustainability. We have fair and inclusive society. One point that is very important for us is the future of academia, where we really try to improve the condition of young researchers all over Ireland. But we also have public involvement and engagement with research, where the idea is to really bridge the gap between science and research with the public, but also with policymakers. And then because one of the strengths is that we have people from various disciplines, one of our strong suit, I would say, is that we have a transdisciplinary expertise for public policy. And so within this strategic plan, we have core activities, including mentoring for underrepresented groups. We have this Imagine project that really helps empowering young people to help them achieve their full potential. And then we also have this Narrative CV workshop. So we organized one workshop that was in person last year. And it was a pretty big success. And given the success that we had, we decided to have one online to kind of widen the audience of this capacity building exercise. And so as part of the Young Academy Ireland, we also try to engage with the public with sharing materials, but we also have engagement with research assessment initiatives. And so the idea here is to really work hard towards improving the situation of the young researchers in Ireland and try to see how we can improve their working condition. And so by that, I mean that we try to identify barriers and how we can support these early career researchers and new innovators in their research to help them maximize their impact. And so as part of these core activities, we organized this Narrative CV workshop online. You have now in front of you a schedule. And so I briefly introduced the Young Academy Ireland. Stefan Müller from UCD will take over and introduce the concept of Narrative CV. And after Stefan, we'll have 3 great presentations from 3 experts in field and experts on Narrative CV. Suz Garrard and Irene Castellano will talk about the importance of Narrative CV for the Irish, but also for the European funding landscape. After that, we'll have a break, and then Pooja Khurana at 10:45 will tell us a bit more about this PEP initiative, which is this great platform where you can get mentoring about your Narrative CV. And then at the end of the workshop, we'll have a breakout session where the idea is that we'll take all the participants, we'll split them in groups, and then with these small groups, you will be able to talk about Narrative CVs, to have this kind of reflection Narrative CVs, what is important, what is not important, what is to do and what is not to do with these Narrative CVs. What is important to note is that each of these groups will be facilitated by an expert, by someone who has a lot of experience with Narrative CVs. And so that person will be able to give you some pointers and to really share with you their experience and what they think is important with Narrative CV or not. And we're aiming at wrapping up at noon. So that's all for my presentation. Now I'll hand it over to Stefan, who will tell you more about Narrative CV.
Yes, welcome everyone. It's great to have over 45 participants here today. So thank you very much for making it and joining the workshop. I'm Stefan Müller, Associate Professor in UCD and also member of Young Academy Ireland. And I just have 2 slides here on narrative CVs just to set the scenes. You will learn much more, and also during the breakout rooms you will go through a couple of examples. But just to ensure we're all on the same page, a narrative CV is basically a description that's structured of someone's contribution and achievements. Okay, and narrative CVs are supposed to reflect a broader range of skills and experiences than the traditional academic CV, which you're probably all aware of, where you list, your education, your current position, publications, presentations, and so on, and it's all bullet points. But sometimes it's actually very hard to see what are your contributions, or to understand what are your contributions on this or that, what impacts have you made. And the narrative CV tries to address this potential issue. So in some way, I think it's a blend, a combination of a traditional academic CV and more a cover letter. In cover letter for applications, for example, you would describe yourself, you would describe your contributions. And in my view, the narrative CV in some way combines both of them. So it explains the context or the how of your achievements, so to give more information about yourself. And as I've said, unlike the traditional bullet point CV, the narrative CV seeks to give a fuller picture of a person's broad range and contributions in context. Okay. And it's highly flexible, and it's used in many different settings, and we will discuss some of them today. For example, funding applications, recruitment, promotions decisions, and so on and so forth. Maybe we can skip to the next slide there. Go to the next slide. Yeah. So 4 core goals of narrative CVs. First of all, it's to focus on key achievements over productivity. Rather than listing 25 publications or 15 publications or 10 publications, you move away from quantitative measurement of research impact. So for example, you move away from listing your citations or listing your H-index and describing how you contributed, for example, to certain projects. What are your most important research projects? What have you learned? What has the research community learned? For example, how have your findings informed other studies? Have your data that you have published, for example, been used in other settings? Has your research been picked up and considered by policymakers? All of these aspects are really important, but very often not communicated through the traditional CV. And it promotes more equitable and responsible research assessment for funding, awards, grants, hiring, and promotion decisions. Having said that, it is time-consuming to write a good narrative CV. And that's why we organized this workshop, because what we noticed during Young Academy Ireland meetings was that, well, we all had to do, or we all had to prepare narrative CVs, but there was a lot of uncertainty, many questions about how to write a good one. And that's why we organized this event online today. We also organized an in-person version of this last year, which went very well. And we think having this online hopefully ensures that we can reach a broader audience. And a narrative CV also provides applicants with a framework where you can outline different professional and life trajectories. For example, if you took career breaks, if you had a role in industry, if you were not in academia your whole career, if you had family caring responsibilities, sick leave, and so on. All of this can be explained in context in that narrative CV. So to sum up, you shift away from numbers to descriptions of your impacts. Now the next slide. Could you maybe go to slide number 11 there? Okay. So when I prepared the slides, I thought about suggestions that helped me, and also that were raised by other members of Young Academy Ireland. First of all, it's very important, if you apply somewhere, check out examples and templates by funders or institutions. If they require you to write a narrative CV, they usually have a template that describes which sections you include and which aspects to mention and what not to mention. So make sure to start early enough and don't leave the narrative CV to the very end, because you need to make sure that what you write in your narrative CV and how you structure it corresponds to what the funder or the institution actually wants. Because you might be forgetting some aspects, or you might focus on something that they don't want. So each narrative CV tends to be slightly different. So make sure to start early, follow the recommended structure, and receive feedback. Very important. Huh? So before you submit your application, don't receive only feedback on your let's say research proposal or the other teaching statements, research statements, and so on, the actual application if it's a grant, but also on your narrative CV. So try to team up with other researchers, maybe with mentors who have successfully submitted something that involved a narrative CV, and ask for critical feedback. What we designed after our first in-person workshop is a narrative CV toolkit, where we provide resources and examples. Some of them will be used during the breakout session today as well. I just created this QR code there this morning. So if you click, or if you select that QR code, you should be able to get directly to the toolkit. Otherwise, just Google Narrative CV Toolkit Young Academy Ireland, and you will find this document, and I hope it will help. So it's 9:45 now, so I will hand over to Suz Garrard, who is a research culture and quality manager at Trinity College Dublin. Suz also contributed to our first workshop, and we're really pleased that you are here again, now in a slightly different function. And Suz will provide an overview of the Irish funding landscape, and also the value that funders place on diverse research outputs. So that's it from me. Thanks again for everyone for joining, and I hand over. Okay, the QR code seems to send to a timeout page, and I noticed the same because it's stored on Zenodo, and that website had a problem yesterday. I will now share the link again, and maybe just try it tomorrow. Oh, it worked for the second time, so maybe you just need to refresh your website. I will still share the link. Thank you.
Can everyone see my the slide?
Yes, that works perfectly.
Okay, Grant, just give me 1 second so I can see my notes. So I just want to say, before I get started, thank you so much to the Young Academy Ireland for inviting me back. I mean, clearly you didn't learn the lesson the first time. If you let me loose on an audience, I'm going to talk. So when I originally worked with the Young Academy Ireland, which I have for several years now, and it's such a great organization, I really support their work, and I'm really honored that they invite me to collaborate with them and to support with them. But previously I was at, which I'll get into in a second, I was at Research Ireland, but now I'm at Trinity College Dublin. So I unfortunately won't be able to stay for the Q&A and the breakout sessions, which is a shame. I have another presentation elsewhere, but so if you have any questions, please let me know at the end of my presentation or pop them in the chat. And or if you'd like as well, I'll have my email at the end, and feel free to email me. I don't mind any kind of errant questions or anything. I can always, if it's not me, I can point you in the right direction. And as there is no such thing as a bad short presentation, I will get going. So my name is Dr. Suz Garrard. I am the Research Culture and Quality Manager with a focus on the faculty of AHSS, so Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences at Trinity College Dublin. So in my current role, we are a clutch of new roles. So there's 3 of us, 1 for each faculty. We are located centrally in Trinity Research, and we are there to provide expertise and guidance and support for the faculties to really strengthen positive research cultures, provide infrastructure and expertise in order to ensure that the outstanding quality of research coming out of Trinity College is informed by best practice internationally and nationally, and is underpinned by a strong positive research culture where researchers feel like their works are being accurately captured, that the hiring and promotion processes are fair, open, and transparent, and make sense, that career pathways are incentivized to be diverse, and that research outputs are really considered in their broadest sense, as well as impact and research excellence. So a little bit about me, my background. So I have a background, my PhD is in English literature, which I received from the University of St. Andrews, coming up on 10 years ago, which is terrifying to me. I'm aging out of the Young Academy Ireland, I think, age bracket. But I was the former EDI lead on the research policy team at Research Ireland, which was also previously Science Foundation Ireland. And where I managed also the Research Ireland Narrative CV and the related briefs and policies to that, including our relationships and commitments to COARA and DORA. I was previously also a research development officer for the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences at Dublin City University and a research support officer at IT Carlo / Southeast Technological University. They were transitioning when I was there. And then originally I came to Ireland in 2018 as the recipient of an Irish Research Council Government of Ireland postdoctoral fellowship at University College Dublin. And then during that period, I did a secondment at the Irish Research Council where I was a program manager for calls such as New Foundations and Coalesce, and actually got to be a national contact point during Horizon 2020 for Societal Challenge 6. So I have quite a myriad, diverse career history of myself. Very unexpected from my end. I, came over doing a postdoc, intending to go down the traditional academic career pathway, and that just didn't end up happening. But I am really happy where I am now, and we'll speak a bit more about it as I go through. But I'm really committed to improving and supporting positive research cultures in Ireland, of which a pivotal mechanism is the narrative style CV. So what I'll be talking about in the rest of my slides is, why do funders like the narrative CV? Why are they supporting it? And what could be next, and what you can do to help improve the process for yourselves, for the funders, for the sector. So this is my obligatory policy and strategy context slide. All these links will take you to the various sites. And I know that Irene will likely provide more in-depth information on these, but I want to mention them as the main Irish funders are pretty much all signatories and or support all of these in different ways. So for example, my experience with the IRC, SFI, and now Research Ireland is, signatories to COAR, the Coalition for Advancing Research Assessment, of which, narrative CVs provide an excellent opportunity, as Stefan's already gone over, the DORA, or the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment, but as well as some other things that you may not immediately think of when you're just thinking of a CV, but including the Research Ireland External Equality, Diversity, and Inclusion Strategy. I've also linked to the Research Ireland Narrative CV page, as well as the Health Research Board's Narrative Style CV Explainer, and a group and excellent resource library that I was able to contribute to during my career, which was the UKRI Joint Funders Group and the Associated Resource Library, which was essentially a group of funders who got together and were like, okay, so we believe in the principles of valorizing diverse career outputs and research outputs, but how do we do that functionally and ensure that research quality is maintained and that research excellence is still awarded? And so that group really got together and used the, you might have heard of the Resume for Researchers, or R4R CV template that the Royal Society developed. And we basically just brought each other problems and we workshopped them, and then created a library of resources that you can access through the links that I've provided. So also, just to note, I have worked at various funders, but I am not currently working for a funder, so I am not speaking for a funder. So these are just my experiences and my unsolicited opinions. So why narrative style CVs for funders? Like, why have they decided to adopt this? Because it's honestly, it's a lot of work for them, and I don't think that a lot of researchers may know that, but depending on the style of the template and what they do or do not prohibit in narrative CVs, as well as things like I'll get into, like assessor training and all that, it's a lot of resource hours for the funders to shift. So why bother? And there's many reasons. And one of the clearest ones is that the narrative CV conceptually promotes some of the other things that funders have already supported and are showing interest in and are trying to progress, including contributions to open science and open research, as well as giving researchers space to articulate things that may have impacted positively or negatively, or just provide context to their research career, such as periods of statutory leave, like maternity, paternity, paternal sick leave, as well as time spent out in industry or time spent in the third sector or public sector or NGO. It really gives the researcher the opportunity to, beyond just a list of publications, to say, this, that 5-year gap between these two publications, I was actually doing this and this is what it taught me. So it's a much more holistic view of the researcher, as Stefan mentioned. So the next thing is just there's been study after study after study after anecdote after lived experience after blog post about how problematic and inappropriate some of the most well-known, popular, overused indicators of research performance and research quality are. So it's been shown that these indicators, such as journal impact factor, H-index, are not particularly useful at an individual level. They're often opaquely calculated, as well as, and I mentioned those two because they're very prominent, but as you likely know, there are a million that are popping up all the time. It's like Y-index, plum metrics, like raisin something. I just made that one up, but it's probably in development. So, and researchers or research funding agencies in Ireland particularly are publicly funded. They need to understand that the monies that they are investing in researchers and research are going to the researchers who have the most appropriate background and are the most suitable for it. And so if we're just relying on these opaquely calculated inappropriate proxies as research performance or an indicator of research quality, it's not actually telling us how capable and fit for purpose the research proposal is or the researcher is. Another reason that funders are shifting to narrative style CVs is that, excuse me, it has to do with a lot of what my current job is about, which is research culture. And a lot of times when people hear research culture, they think that that's kind of like the soft side of things. That's like, oh, that's the environment piece and things. But actually, again, studies continue to show that negative research cultures in which things like competition, poor mentorship opportunities, and exclusivity and equity, and those cultures where that is prominent, the results from the researchers and the research and the related outputs from those teams and schools and faculties and institutions are worse and less impactful. So again, this is about value for money for the funders in a certain sense, as well as a real desire as a public body to do what is right and what is good, and to live by the principles of the EU and Ireland. Again, the narrative CV often complements efforts in support of open science. They give space for researchers to say, hey, look, I not only did I publish, but I deposited it into an institutional repository, or I published in a Diamond open access journal. And that not only shows that you are committed to making, the process of science and the outputs of it transparent and accessible to all, but that you're also contributing to the research culture and the research community and promoting and kind of practicing what you preach. And then one of my favorite things about the narrative CV is that it really does promote equity, diversity, and inclusion in research teams and research methodologies. It forces researchers to think about the ways in which their research and their hiring practices or their collaboration practices are impacting others, are making academia and academic research more open and accessible, but as well as making them think about how their research impacts beyond traditional indicators and metrics and journal titles. It really makes you think, okay, well, what did my research do for a community? What did my research do in terms of its, I did an exhibition with a public library, or I went into schools, or I co-designed, I did a lot of PPI, things like that. It really does give you space that a normal CV just doesn't give you. And funders want to hear that because evaluators need to hear that. Evaluators need to know who you are and the impact of your research articulated by the person who knows it best, which is you, which is not a for-profit commercial publisher. So, and then finally, again, provide a more holistic assessment with your experience and outputs. And again, contextualizing periods of statutory leave. And this isn't to say that, I think it's important to note when I put this, it isn't to say like, oh, you need to justify why you had a gap in your publication history. No, it's actually saying that like, there was a gap. I took a period of statutory leave. However, during that leave, I was able to like, I learned all these things like from my maternity leave, or I was able to work part-time during a period, because it could also just be like a career break, or it could be time where you decide to step out, diversify your portfolio, and work in an NGO or work at a research-informed position. And you get to talk about that, and it really does make academia more permeable, which is something I'm really committed to in all of my roles. And that is how we make academia, one of the ways we make academia sustainable for researchers, is that you not only allow for the movement in and out of academia, so therefore you have to understand what outside experiences contribute to academic posts and vice versa, but also to incentivize it and valorize it and say, actually, excellent research includes people who have worked in these diverse fields, and bring that into teams and research projects. So what is supporting this shift at the Irish funding sector? So it's being supported by continuous iteration. And I know that from the Research Ireland perspective, and from my work with the HRB and EPA and things, that all these agencies contribute man hours and time to groups and communities of practice, and continual iteration and evaluation of the narrative CV to ensure that it's constantly getting better and more accurate and more representative and more accessible. So participation in groups such as the UKRI Joint Funders Group, which I mentioned, as well as there are multiple COARA working groups that have dimensions of the narrative CV as a kind of like part of the thematic structure. So I included a link there. You can look into the work of them. And then guidance from DORA as well regarding their excellent publication of the responsible use of quantitative indicators in research assessment, which will actually take you through some of the most heavily used indicators and metrics, and basically give you the real description of them, and say, like, here's what it says it's supposed to do, here's what it actually does, here's where it may be useful, and here's where it's not particularly useful or appropriate. And it's really helpful to look at from a funding perspective, as well as from a researcher perspective, when you're thinking about how do I best articulate my research. Another thing that's supporting this are the development of bespoke funder guidance and training for research proposal evaluators. So different funders in Ireland and internationally do this differently. Some have really thorough kind of structured training. Others provide more kind of principles-based training and things, but they all do something so that evaluators aren't just given a new CV style and are then like, okay, well, this is great, but I'm looking for the H index. So it's important to know that there is work behind the scenes going on in the funding landscape around that. However, it's constantly, it always needs to be updated, because there's always new metrics, there's always new things to understand. So the next one is supporting capacity building for narrative CV style writing and evaluation. So for example, Research Ireland was, I had the privilege of contributing to building the PEP-CV platform, which Pooja is the wonderful community manager, and she'll be able to say all the good things about that. But basically, putting money and hours into community-based, open source things that enhance people's understanding of narrative CVs and help bring people along the journey. And then funder guidelines prohibiting quantitative indicators of research quality and performance. So what I mean by that is, for example, on the Research Ireland CV, a narrative CV template, you are not allowed to use a list of different kind of quantitative metrics. You're not allowed to list in your narrative CV. I have had 25 total publications in my career thus far. Rather, and if you do include those, that you run the risk of them being just completely redacted. So if you think about it, if you put a lot of them in there, it's not only kind of wasting the funder's time of having to go through and redact, but then the evaluator's getting what looks like a declassified government document. So it really behooves you to really think about your research in terms around, like, what's a broad definition of impact? How do I see my work impacting society, the economy, science, the research community, and to think about it that way. And then finally, adoption based on type of funding call or target career stage. So for example, a narrative CV may be more or less useful depending on the type of research funding call there is. So they're particularly useful in fellowship type and career development program calls. However, depending on the funder, sometimes they're less used in consortia-based ones, but that's something I'll get to in my next slide. Something I will say though is like, please, please, please listen to Stefan and everyone at the Young Academy Ireland in saying that you should have a base narrative CV and then be able to work and adjust depending on what the program call you are applying for or the type of promotion that you're going for is, because a single research output can be talked about in a myriad of different ways with a myriad of different emphases placed on different dimensions of it. And that will depend on the thing that you're trying to do or the thing you're trying to achieve. So my final content slide is just what could be next from the funders. And what you can do. So what could be next? Fully narrative CVs. So like currently, for example, the Research Ireland one, last time I checked, is still a semi-structured, semi-narrative CV. So it still has as a list of publications of like, I think it's depending on the program call, your top 3 or top 5 peer-reviewed publications in it. So, but other places internationally have done a fully narrative CV. I know that Luxembourg, for example, has a fully 2-page narrative CV. Team narrative CVs, that's something I've been part of working groups on. And, what does it mean when you're running a funding program that's for, say, a research center or a huge consortia-based one? What does it mean to use narrative to talk about the team's achievements and the team's expertise and impact rather than like an individual list of here's the lead, here's the co-PI's publications, and then here's all the random people we've tacked on. It is much more about like bringing everyone along with you and really discussing how the team is really going to exemplify that call. Or excuse me, that proposal. So across the board adoption of a narrative CV across funding calls, again, it's not used always. And in some cases, I think an argument could be made that it's more or less appropriate, but I would like to see wider adoption of it. Regular evaluation of narrative style CVs with feedback from researchers and evaluators. I think that that will hopefully be, done more regularly and periodically. I know the HRB's been really great about kind of running through these evaluation frameworks. And then different structures and shared common templates. So a lot of people always ask for like, well, why can't there just be a universal template for a narrative CV? And it's like, well, there's not really any kind of, it's all principles based. It's all talking about different things based on the funding call and the funder and things. But I think that there are some like base things that that you can already have in your pocket ready to adapt. But who knows, next we could see more kind of shared common templates across some of the major funders, for example, or from say, even Horizon Europe or something. And then finally, integration of the CV into grant management systems or CRIS systems at institutions with external compatibility. What I mean by that is maybe you could like pull in ORCID things. And I know some institutions do that, some funders have that, but that could be something as well that comes more online or becomes more prominent in the Irish funding landscape. So the final things I want to say to you before I promise to shut up is that funders need you to provide feedback, to be brave and share your experiences of any barriers or pain points that exist in the context of the narrative CV or even in the funding process as a whole. They need you to flag these things because sometimes they're busy managing the top level of it and they don't have the capacity or the experience that you do engaging with it from the position that you're in. And also the sector needs you to be brave. And I was at an event last night where an MEP made a great, she was talking about human rights, and she was saying that there will never be, like, nothing will ever get done on the basis that it is right. It will get done because people make the case over and over and over and over again until it is done. And I think that's important for early career researchers to remember, is that there is like the right thing to do and there are principles that we uphold, but it takes the work of the Young Academy and also of individual researchers to make the case to their institution, to funders, in things like the narrative CV. So not only that the narrative CV is useful and that it helps articulate more wholly their experience and who they are as a researcher, but also what does research excellence within a narrative CV look like? What does impact mean to you? What does impact, how should it be talked about? What kind of research output should be incentivized and valorized and acknowledged in research funding applications and promotion applications and all kinds of moments of assessment, as Giovanna Dora would put it. So that is all from me. Please, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. And yeah, thank you so much for letting me yap at you for ages. Hopefully that was helpful. Oh, thank you for all the
Thank you very
hands.
much. Thank you very much. Really insightful presentation and a lot of really useful and helpful advice. Really appreciate that. Maybe I just introduce the next speaker then very quickly. Irene Castellano is Project Officer at the Health Research Board, RHB, and also contributed to our last workshop. And Irene will talk about the European policy context, narrative CVs across Europe, and tailoring applications to specific funding calls. And I believe that's also very important because today we don't only have attendees based on the island, but internationally. And we look forward to Irene's presentation there.
Thank you. I will also share 1 second. Here. Yeah. Yeah, so thank you, Stefan. Thank you so much for inviting me again. It's great to be involved in these events and workshops. So I'm Irene Castellano, and indeed I'm based in the Health Research Board, but I am also a board member of the Marie Curie Alumni Association, and that's where I've been more involved in the research assessment reform and narrative CVs, apart from, of course, also my experience working in a funder. I also bring that into the table. So with all of this, I'll go through my presentation today. So the Marie Curie Alumni Association, it is an association of current and past members, current and past recipients of the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Fellowship. It can be the PhD one, so the doctoral networks, but also the postdoctoral ones. So we are a global association. We have members all over the world, and I'm currently a board member of the association, but I'm based in Ireland, so I'm always very happy to contribute to anything in here. So I'll go through a little bit of the background, although we've heard a lot as well, so sorry if there's a bit of repetition, why narrative CVs and where they come from. Then I'm also going to bring some results from a survey we did recently in the association, which I think is very interesting data. And then I'll talk a little bit about Horizon Europe and how they've adopted narrative CVs, and then how we can tailor the narrative CVs to funders. So yeah, the research assessment reform, it is a global movement that is part of the research and innovation policy agenda globally. And it started because research assessment practices, they do shape careers, they shape opportunities, and they also shape well-being of researchers everywhere, and influences, of course, research culture, as Suz has already explained. However, there's been so far very narrow definitions of excellence, which have really guided researchers' careers in one way. But researchers do many more things, as you can see in this little iceberg. In order to do that excellence research that is valorized or is praised, we do many other things that are not really visible. So this is also a way to try to look at those other skills and also recognize them and see that there's a diversity, that diversity makes academia richer and research better. So narrative CVs for me are really a tool for the research assessment reform. It is a way of how can we put these principles in practice? How can we make this, how can we change this? And that they are really a tool that funders are using a lot nowadays, but not only, they are starting to be expanded beyond funders as well. So this, I really like this little image from, yeah, that it really shows the gap that we have at the moment between advancing science and advancing careers in some things. So many times we do things that might help to advance our career, but they might not really advance science. And I'm sure you've heard this a lot, but things like publishing negative results or showing negative results doesn't really advance your career. So, but it really advances science. So this is just to show that there is a gap. There is a gap in this sense that we have to try to close. Also, the opposite can be true. So things that can things like publishing in high impact factor will really advance your career, but that doesn't necessarily advance science. It could, but not necessarily. So there are many things around in this image, but it's just to show the gap that there is there. And Narrative CVs, as I said, is a tool that aim to close that gap a little bit and to bring those two things closer together. So in terms of where we come from and the policy context, this goes all the way back to 2012. I like to put numbers to give perspective to this and see the movement that has brought us where we are today. So things like DORA that Suz was already mentioning started in 2012. At that year, I think other things like ORCID also started back in 2012. And nowadays, I think they've really shaped the research assessment reform a lot. 2015 was the first, one of the first manifestos or policy briefs. It's the Leiden Manifesto for Research Metrics. It really looks into what metrics are, what they actually mean, because sometimes we use them and we don't really know where they come from, and how to use them more responsible. Open science, I think, is very related as well to the research assessment reform. I think it does also help to diversify and to show and to have more transparent science. And Plan S was formed in 2018. Plan S, it's a coalition of also funders around open access and how can we publish open access and change the publishing landscape a little bit to make that fit for purpose for researchers, so we don't have to pay everyone. At the moment, sometimes we have to pay to actually publish, so researchers have to pay, but we have to pay again to read. So all that system, how we can make it more transparent, and Plan S started in 2018. 2019, we have the Hong Kong principles that they are around research integrity, and again, how we can assess in a way that we value research integrity. And also at that time, the first narrative CV that Suz mentioned before was developed. This is the resume for researchers that has really been the base of many others that came after and many other templates. And it's the one we're going to use today as a base as well. And it was developed by the Real Society in the UK. So that was a little bit the start. And there was a lot of movement at that time that came together into the European Commission to start to look at this a bit more seriously. And the research assessment reform actually came into the ERA policy agenda. So the ERA is the European Research Area, and it is the place where in Europe they make research policy, research and innovation policy. So in that one, we started to have then in 2022 the first ERA action on research assessment reform. And at the same time, they created QARA. So QARA is the Coalition for Advancing Research Assessment, and it brings together many organizations. It's a bottom-up initiative. So any organization that agrees with the QARA principles, they will sign and they can join different working groups. And there's a lot of work being done in terms of how to implement all those principles, because we can talk a lot about it, but how the change actually reaches the ground and reaches universities and researchers. So there's a lot of work being done in Quora that was created then in 2022. In 2023, the ERC introduced a narrative-like CV. I'll talk about this a little bit more later. And then we are at the moment in a new ERA policy agenda cycle that started in 2025. And again, we have an action for the research assessment reform. So yeah, in the meanwhile, I added in blue anything related with the Marie Curie Alumni Association, because we've been really involved in Quora since the very beginning. We did our first policy brief in the research assessment reform, about the research assessment reform in 2019 already, and we were very involved during that time of the creation of Quora. And currently the vice chair of Quora is a Marie Curie alumni member, Karen Strubans, who has really pushed the association to be more involved in this area. So we signed Quora in 2022. We established the PEP-CV platform that also Pooja is going to talk about later. And then in 2024, when I became board member, I wanted to coordinate a bit more our involvement in all the research assessment reform related activities that we had in the association. So we created an internal coordination group. We also joined ORCID. And again, Pooja will talk a bit more about this. And this year, as I said, we have a survey that I'm going to present some of the data from that survey. And we also just published the Quora action plan for our association. So it's in Zenodo. So this is the evolution that we've had since our first policy brief in 2019 to the Quora action plan that we've just published, and hopefully will bring some action internally in our association, but also in our advocacy efforts that we do externally. So yeah, as I said, we are involved in Quora. We signed Quora, but we are also members in different working groups. Many of them are already finishing, but one, for example, just started. That is the Thinking Critically About University Ranking rankings. This group is a new group because Quora saw a gap in terms of a lot of work can be done on the ground, a lot of by universities or by funders, but at the end, universities are also being ranked and assessed, and that is really impacting then how they behave. And of course, things like H-index and journal impact factors, they are all very important for these university rankings. So unless we change how that works, actual change might not really go through as fast as we want. So there is a new working group we're involved in around this. And then the other three are kind of finishing, but there's the early and mid-career researchers working group, the multilingualism working group, and also towards the inclusive research evaluation working group. We're also involved in different EU-funded projects, and then other projects like PEP-CV that we'll mention later. So now I'm gonna go through the survey that we've launched last year. Our objective was really to collect evidence from the community, especially early career researchers, on how research are currently assessed, and also what assessment practices are currently influencing careers, mobility, and recognition. And this was done last year in September, from September to October. It was open for 1 month, and of course, anybody could answer the survey, but of course, it was targeted because we used our own social media and our own means to target people to respond. So yeah, current and past MSCA fellows were the main respondents of our survey, and especially MCA members. There was an online distribution, as I said, email and social media, and there were some incentives as well. We had 636 full responses, which was a good number. We were quite happy with that. So this is some of the data that we had. We did ask them how familiar they were with different terms in relation to the research assessment reform that you can see here. And in general, I think there was a low knowledge of the different responsible research assessment initiatives. The one that was known the most was a narrative CV, which again, I think it makes complete sense because it's what reaches researchers. It's a practical tool that people have to use. So it's the one that was most known, with 17% being highly knowledgeable of these. But that goes down then a little bit more in terms of knowledge about DORA, QARA, and then other frameworks or manifestos were less known. In terms of the current assessment practices, I really like this first graph because it shows that many early career researchers are actually actively involved in assessing research. So of course we are assessed, but we also assess research, especially peer review, right? We're highly involved in peer review, but we are also involved in other activities. So all the research system is kind of involved in assessing research. That's the basis of many of the assessment practices that we have, either papers, PhDs, funding applications. At the end are the researchers that do that evaluation. So there's a lot of power, I guess, that we hold, and things that we can bring into panels or into assessment decisions we're involved in that can shape and make small changes in the landscape. And the second one, again, is the 10 top metrics that people thought they are used for hiring or promotion in their institutions. And in here, we can see, well, I guess we're not very surprised to see the peer review publications is number one still. High impact journals, it's also very important. The second one, attracting funding, but then also research leadership as number 4. That's a very interesting one to see, and contribution to teaching and supervision. So I guess it shows we're a little bit in a transition period where still traditional metrics are being valued and assessed, but I guess new ways of assessing are also trying to find their way in. And the last one, it is about the support for the implementation of the research assessment reform. So in general, there is a big support whenever they know about it. So there's a lot of don't knows, but for the people that know about the movement and know about the change, there's a big support at different career stages. I have to say, in terms of opposition, it is small, but the largest disagree with the implementation is actually in leading researchers. I know it's quite small, but it is still, I think they can make a lot of noise. They do have power, and sometimes few people opposing something, it's enough for change not to happen, because change takes time and takes effort, and takes energy from the full system. So yeah, that is a little bit about the data that we had. That we'll have a report and we'll publish all of these. We have more data coming through, but I thought it would be nice to share with you all. And then also a way to encourage everybody to get involved if it's something you are interested in. There's many ways that an early career researcher can get involved, but I do think it's important because it is affecting early career researchers the most, as we are transitioning from one system to another. At the end, we have to satisfy everything, or it can feel like you have to satisfy both systems, and it can be quite challenging. So yeah, I think we should really be involved in these conversations. You can do that at global level, national level, and local level, and you can choose your way to contribute. It doesn't have to be anything huge. It can be something small in your local university, join a seminar, join a working group, suggest an activity, be a facilitator in events like today. Small things like that can already go a long way. At national level in Ireland, there's the National Open Research Forum, and then we also have a Quora national chapter, just so you know. And at a global level, there's always many consultations coming from the Commission or surveys or from many different stakeholders that you can participate in. And you can also participate through organizations of early career researchers, such as the MCAA, but also the Young Academy of Ireland or the Young Academy of Europe, Eurodoc, or any other organization that you might be part of. So there's many ways to be involved, I guess it's my message. So find yours if this interests you. The next, I'm going to move now to actually implementation by the European Commission and in Horizon Europe. So the Commission really supports, it's the one supporting Quora, and it's, as I said, this topic, the research assessment reform, is part of the policy agenda. But in terms of implementation in its own program, I guess there's still work they could do. But I'll tell you how it is at the moment. So in Pillar 2 of Horizon Europe, and Pillar 1 of Horizon Europe, we have the European Research Council that has incorporated a narrative-like CV. It is not a fully narrative CV, and it doesn't really follow the resume for researchers, but it's trying to incorporate some narrative into it. So the format is like this. You would have to add the CV as part of part B1 of the proposal template. If you download this part B1, you can click actually in this link and you go to the template itself, and you will see there's a section called Curriculum Vitae and Track Record, which is maximum 4 pages. And that is the section of, I guess, the CV. You just have to follow the template itself that they give you. So these bullet points I have here, they are just taken from the template itself. So first you have to add your personal details. This would be like a traditional CV where you add your education, your current position, your past position in a chronological order. So the evaluators know who you are in a very schematic way. And after the personal details, then they come the research achievements. You can add up to 10 research outputs, and you decide which research outputs you want to include. They don't have to be only publications. There's a variety of research outputs that can be included. There's not a list. There's a list that they include, but it's not exhaustive. And they say, depending on the research area as well that you are at, you can choose the research outputs that are relevant to your discipline. And then they do say to add a little narrative about that specific research output that you've chosen. So that is one of the sections. And then the next is the peer recognition section. So again, you have to add a list of peer recognition achievements that you think you are relevant. They don't give a number this time. I guess it's up to you, but you have that 4 pages limit. That's the only thing. And then again, they ask for a little narrative next to each of the examples that you choose. After that, there's additional information. So there is a section where you can add career breaks, diverse career paths, and life events, similar to what Suz was explaining before. And then there's also the last section, it's other contributions that you might have done to the research community. And they talk about them about particularly noteworthy contributions. So this is anything here you can be creative and really bring something very specific to you and to your CV. So that is the narrative-like CV that the ERC has incorporated into their program. In terms of the MSCA, the Maria Sklodowska-Curie program, this only applies for the postdoctoral fellowships because the doctoral networks, it's a consortium, so that would be similar to Pillar 2. But for the postdoctoral fellowships, it is a traditional CV what they require. There's a small qualitative element encouraged rather than inclusion of journal impact factor, but that's the only little thing that they've added. It is true that the evaluation criteria of the MSCA is quite broad and it has a big focus on training and all of that, but still the CV, it's a traditional CV, what they are asking for. And then I wanted to talk about Pillar 2 and Pillar 3 because sometimes they are forgotten about. And actually, these are more collaborative pillars, especially Pillar 2. It's a collaborative pillar, so you need to have a large consortium in order to apply for this call. And CVs are not asked at all. The calls themselves there and the projects, they are all about the consortium you put together. So you have to talk about the team, and these they evaluate the team itself as part of the implementation evaluation criteria. And if you go to the proposal template, this will be section 3.2, capacity of participants and consortium as a whole. So that's a section that is 3 pages, and you just have to write about the team. So this is how it has always been done. The focus has never been in individual researchers, but on the research idea and the capacity of the team to actually deliver and the complementarity of the skills that you bring in the team. So that is Horizon Europe evaluation criteria. And then I'll finish with some tips to tailor your CV. And I'm gonna first focus on tailor your CV to yourself and your strengths, and then tailor your CV to the funding grant. And you have to try to do both at the same time, of course. But I think it's very important to play to your strengths. A narrative CV suddenly expands and suddenly you can do many more things, but it is important to stay focused to your strengths and play to them. So first of all, make it easy for the evaluators to understand who you are, so that because it's a narrative CV, it can start to be everything a little bit more messy. So just make sure that at the very beginning, if there's a section for personal details, that you make it very clear. They know straight away who you are, and they don't have to start guessing and finding and spending time for that. And chronological order normally gives that structure. So try to add that if you can as part of the template. Of course, you are always going to be dictated or guided by the template that they provide. Narrative CVs is a little bit of a change of a mindset. The focus changes from what you've done, numbers and outputs, to how you've done that and how you've achieved them, and the narrative around it. Provide also evidence in your narrative. The fact that now you're just writing something, it doesn't mean you don't have to show evidence, and you can use both qualitative and quantitative evidence to support the narrative that you are including. And as I said, play to your strengths. Evidence your ability and your potential to implement the project. So of course why they are asking for your CVs, because they want to see if whatever you have suggested you are going to do in your project, that you have the ability and the tools to deliver on that. So you really need to show that ability and that potential to implement a project like this. It doesn't mean you've done it before, of course not, because it's something new, but that you have the tools to be able to do something like this. You don't have, as I said, you don't have to excel at everything, at all the areas of research. Now, now we are talking about diversifying outputs, but it doesn't mean you have to be good at all of them. So just choose the ones that are good for you and focus on those. And ensure you add relevant information only. Something can be very close to your heart, but might not be a good example for the proposal that you are writing at that moment. So yeah, try to be a bit distant of your own things and include that information that will be most relevant. And at the end of the day, you decide what success means to you, and you have to sell that to the reviewer. So don't be afraid to add things or contributions that maybe are not that traditional. yeah, you decide and you convince. And when you know your worth, I think it's easier also to sell it and be coherent. That's always important in the full funding application, not only in the CV. And then finally, practical tips for to tailor your CV to a funder. So as Sue said, every funder has a reason behind why they're using narrative CVs, and also sometimes they might only use them in some funding calls and not in others. So make sure you know why they're using a narrative CV and why in that call. And the aim of the scheme itself will really guide the type of contributions that you might have to include in your narrative CV. So think about career development. The Marie Sklodowska-Curie program has, for example, a huge emphasis on training. So training and career development. So think about contributions that will be relevant for that. But the ERC is more a high risk, high gain type of program. So you might have to think about a bit different and tailor your CV a little bit to the focus of the call and choose your contributions more based on the call. In terms of leadership, training, as I said, high risk, high gain. Also societal impact. Some calls have more focus on societal impact than others, or in policy impact, or EP or PPI, education and public engagement. So if the call itself has a focus on that, then you should include some contributions on that, of course. Others might have a more of an economic impact. They might ask for co-funding, for knowledge translation, patents. And then finally, as I said, collaboration. Maybe others have a focus on multi-inter or transdisciplinary collaborations and research. So just look at the call itself. And if the call is a broad bottom-up call, then you choose what's your proposal going to be its strengths, what's going to be the focus. It's going to have a huge societal impact, for example. So yeah, tailor the outputs that you choose to put in your CV to your proposal and to the funding call itself. Always consult the call guidance, attend any scheme sessions or webinars that they might be doing. Use the templates, always use the templates. Look at the evaluation criteria as well that they use. I think this is one of the most useful things you can do, because that's what the evaluators are constantly going and looking at. Okay, what am I evaluating on? Oh, I forgot the question. Let's read again the question. And then they go to your proposal. So they will always be guided by the evaluation criteria. So go on, look for it. And check also if there's any information on how the CV will be evaluated. Sometimes they do explain, other times it might be part of one evaluation criteria, or just have a look. So that's it for me. Thank you so much. Hopefully there was something there for you, and I'm happy to continue and support in the breakout sessions.
Okay, I'd say we continue. It was a short break, but we have another break later on before the lab sessions. Lab sessions. I'm not teaching today. Before the breakout rooms. Okay, next up is Pooja Khurana, who's Career Development Manager at the Marie Curie Alumni Association. And Pooja will talk about, introduce the PEP-CV initiative as a resource for the research and innovation community. I'd say, if possible, keep your presentation to around 20 minutes, so we still have a bit of time for Q&A. Our breakout sessions will then start at 11:15. Okay, thank you very much, Pooja.
Thank you, Stefan. So hello and welcome everybody. My name is Pooja and I'm the Career Development Manager at the Marie Curie Alumni Association. I've been working on the PEP-CV project together with Irene and Sean for a couple of years now. Suz and I also used to work together, and now, of course, she's moved on to Trinity College Dublin. So can I get a thumbs up if you can see my slides okay? Brilliant. So I would like to start today with, why do researchers require support? Not that we need to delve into it, because I'm sure today most of us have had experiences that have warranted support. So as we know that within academia, there are issues concerning what and how things are recognized and valued. Just yesterday, as a career development manager, I received many emails from our members, and just yesterday I received a 2-page long email from someone saying that I don't have a first author publication and I'm struggling to find my next position. So there still persists a publish or perish culture within academia that results in hyper-competition, issues with anxiety and depression also within our research community. Of course, we have precarious job contracts. There is little security for young and midterm academics, and issues also exist within the DEI aspects. There are structural and systemic inequalities and barriers that are shaped within the system. So when we talk about narrative CVs, I won't get into the details of it because we've talked about a lot with the previous speaking sessions, but narrative CVs has kind of divulged as one of the pathways that addresses these issues that exist. Now, when we think of a healthy research culture, narrative CV is like a practical tool that plays a part. However, there are other dimensions to it, some of which Irene also touched on, like responsible research assessment, open science, EDI spaces where people value each other, value their contributions even outside the academic system. Of course, focusing on the well-being of researchers and research integrity, public engagement, and the list goes on. And a couple of days ago on LinkedIn, there were also posts on how research culture is also affected by the communication culture, the language people use in talking to each other, the spoken and unspoken communication channels we have within our organizations. So within PEP-CV, our entire effort has been to touch on these aspects, of course, keeping narrative CV information and knowledge exchange at the core, but also address things that affect research culture as a whole. And so we are aiming to shift within what we do as what and who is visible and valued within research. So what is the PEP-CV platform? So PEP-CV, as you can see here, stands for Peer Exchange Platform for Narrative Style CVs. It is a global mentoring initiative where peers get together, mentors or mentees come together, share knowledge in crafting a narrative style CV. Of course, within this process, there is reflection on what they have achieved, what the experiences they've shared, and using feedback, which Stefan mentioned in his talk earlier, is extremely important element, giving each other feedback and improving, crafting their CVs as they go along. It is open for researchers all across the globe at whatever career stages and whatever sectors they come from. And as mentioned before, within PEP-CV, we want to take this contribution that researchers are making by giving their volunteer time in recognizing this effort beyond metrics. It is also a community that focuses heavily on confidence shaping, capacity building, and looking at researchers as a whole. So a holistic approach to our experiences. And of course, because it is a global community, we respect a lot of inclusivity, openness, and collaboration, which are also key elements within healthy research culture. Now, launched just over 2 years ago, we have already, reached a membership of over 1,800 members, of which, as you can see, over 1,500 are mentees and almost 500 mentors. So why did we choose mentoring as a way to share knowledge around narrative CVs? As you might have experienced in your careers as well, mentoring not only gives you knowledge on the thematic or the theme or the topic of the subject, but it also shapes the researcher holistically. It helps develop skills, talk about issues that you're facing, some challenges that you might be facing within or outside the topic. It also helps to develop your interpersonal skills when you're talking to people coming from different sectors, different disciplines, and different countries and cultures. It really expands who you are as a person. And also there has been research which is documented that focuses on the issues that academics and researchers face, which you can see in this image as like DEI issues, bullying and harassment. These peaks of issues can be softened when you have a supportive culture, a supportive mentorship culture, and resource availability in your circle. So within PEP-CV, we focus on our values, which concentrate around collaboration, EDI, collegiality, pure exchange, and openness. We have absolutely no barriers to who can join, when they can join, how much time they give. There are absolutely no boundaries also to who is part of our PEP-CV community. Now, this is an old data, but demographically, you can see our highest reach or contribution has come from Europe. Within the scientific domains, we have a good mix of different scientific fields where mentors and mentees come from social sciences, health and humanities, engineering, and agricultural services. And within the job family, you can see most of our demographics is from the established PhDs, which is the R2 is recognized researchers. And here you can see a good spread of the countries our members come from. Now, Irene has already touched upon the kind of the history of where narrative CVs developed in. And just to give you a little bit of an idea that in 2021, there was a huge event organized by DORA where over 40 funding organizations joined, and from 22 countries which were engaged in the discussions around narrative CV. By 2024, this shifted to a greater participation in adopting of narrative CVs. And today, as we have seen in the last couple of years only, there has been a global shift towards adopting narrative CVs. There are lots of conversations, not just within Europe, but outside as well, on responsible research assessments and how we constitute broader research impact. So here are just a few of the many funding agencies and organizations that have already adopted the narrative style CV approach. Within PEP-CV, we are managed by the MCAA. So I, as a community manager and a career development manager, manage the platform, manage the members of PEP-CV. However, it is funded by 6 funding agencies, as you can see here: Research Ireland, NWO, UKRI, Wellcome Trust, FNR, and SNSF. We are also supported by Young Academy of Europe, and we're still in kind of a sponsorship stage to getting a collaboration together with University of Beira Interior in Portugal. And as always, we're always looking for new funders, new institutes, even open to university collaboration. So if you or your organization is interested in joining hands with PEP-CV, we always welcome this. So how does PEP-CV work? Now, in the platform, when you are registered, you can join as a mentee or a mentor, or if you're curious, you can also join as both. As a mentee, you register, fill out your profile, find potential mentors, contact them, and arrange a meeting. Similarly, as a mentor, you do the same. You wait for the mentees to contact you, except based on your limits around the time. If you're too busy, please don't accept too many mentorships, and then you arrange a meeting. However, the most important thing here is that the mentee has to take the first step in reaching out to the mentors. Now, what do you gain by joining this platform? Apart from, of course, developing and strengthening your narrative style CV, is you have peer-to-peer learning, networking, possible collaborations even outside the narrative style CV engagement that you have. You, of course, help to diversify your strengths, your experiences, your achievements, and you also get an opportunity to look at your experiences from the lens of someone completely out of your domain different sector, different country, different culture, which makes even your experiences richer than they already are. And of course, by doing so, you also contribute, as Irene mentioned, joining different workshops, joining events, you're always continuing and contributing to support inclusive research cultures. Now, again, something that Irene already touched upon, but as we have seen, narrative CVs are a tool that help us diversify research outputs. As she mentioned, also in 2012, ORCID came into being, which is also a digital tool that feeds into diversifying this research output in giving you a unique user ID or identifier where you can put these achievements that you have online for different funders and universities to see. Now, where PEP-CV comes into focus is that we bring a platform that helps in bringing people together from across the globe who are interested in writing narrative CV, and of course, respecting the EDI values around it. So we thought, what better way if we are using this platform for enhancing narrative CV, if we also collaborated with ORCID so that we can give value, recognition, and reward the mentoring, the volunteer mentoring, sorry, having a brain freeze, volunteer mentoring pathways that researchers are contributing to. So by doing so, you're able to have your achievements, and this is applicable to both mentors and mentees, that once you finish your mentorship, you can link your profile to ORCID and display your achievements on your ORCID profile. So on the PEP-CV platform, you also have availability of resources. So these are narrative style templates used by the funders who are supporting PEP-CV. However, you can also have other resources. Currently, we are working on creating a community resource hub where you as a user can also put in resources around narrative CV or research culture, research assessment into the platform directly, but we're currently building this. This is just a snapshot of the community events we had in the past. These are photos from when we launched our platform back in March 2024 in one of the MCA annual conferences. And since we have had lots of virtual events, fortunate to have some in-person events as well, which we often combine with our annual conference. And here, this year, we also had our first in-person workshop on how to write narrative CVs. Now, of course, managing a global platform comes with its own sets of challenges. And some of these I thought would be interesting for me to share with you so you understand that it's not always, la la land. It does come with a huge set of responsibilities. Within the platform, of course, it is topic specific. So mentorship happens around narrative CVs, and it could be field specific as well. So sometimes there are mismatched expectations, always shifting expectations from what a mentor and mentee require in the relationship that they establish. There are, of course, issues around time, resources. We're constantly getting feedback on how to enhance our platform. But of course, it comes with its own logistical issues and limits, and of course, financial and funding limitations. Not very evident, but we have had hints of inherent biases and discrimination that do exist. Now, mind you, there's not a lot of personal information that is shared amongst mentors and mentees about each other. It's usually based on names only. However, we have received some sort of feedback where some members find it more difficult to connect with potential mentors than others. And of course, managing a global community as a community manager also comes with its interesting sets of challenges. The learnings that we've had in the last couple of years is to get constant feedback. We try our best to use this feedback and have it in a recycled loop where we use community feedback to enhance our platform, enhance the resources and the events that we develop. We will be continuing with ORCID rewards and recognition, and we'll also be introducing certifications to again valorize the volunteer efforts of our members. Community engagement is pivotal. It is vital to any platform. And recently, I have had this amazing experience where the next couple of workshops that I'm developing, I am co-developing with our community members based on their experiences, their needs. And of course, as I said, there are challenges around diversity and inclusion, which we are also now taking into what we're building in the future. So as our priorities for this year and next, we want to continue to expand our reach beyond European countries and institutes. We want to strengthen our EDI aspects, not just within mentoring, but narrative CV focused as well. Based on the issues that we mentioned earlier, we are developing or co-developing tailored workshops, which will be starting in September. So you'll be hearing more from PEP-CV community. And if you're interested to be a part of it, please do reach out to me. And we've wanted to do this for a while now, but time limitations didn't allow us. But we will be including narrative CV reviewers in the PEP-CV community as well, because whenever we have any sort of events, we do get these challenges raised by reviewers that they also need more training and more interaction with other reviewers to really understand how to assess and evaluate narrative CVs. And one of our most important ongoing contributions would be to work towards maintaining or creating a healthy research and researcher environment. And before we get into the workshop today, this is just a gentle reminder to all researchers out here that the way we used to quantify traditional success metrics does no longer translate to the research success that you have, because the values which have always existed but unfortunately were not recognized are getting recognized now, that focus more on the quality of your work, the collaboration, the societal contribution that you're having, and also integrity of research and transparency and modesty. And if you're interested in joining the platform, you have the QR code here. I can also share the link in the chat later. You're most welcome. I also have step-by-step guides. There are also videos on the platform to help both mentors and mentees to how to write narrative CVs, but also how to make the best of the mentoring platform. And with that, I thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, happy to take them. Thank you. Over to you, Stefan.
Thank you so much, Pooja. That's great. Thank you very much for this, for these 3 excellent presentations, which were extremely helpful for us and hopefully for you in the audience. I hand over to, or actually, I think maybe we have time for 1 or 2 questions because the breakout rooms start at 1:15. So let's first collect your questions. What questions do you have so far? You can use the chat or just unmute yourself. Well, I'd be surprised if there are no questions at all, but maybe you're a bit shy and want to discuss that in the breakout rooms, which is, Pooja, you have a comment or a question there, yeah.
Yes, actually, it's funny that I'm asking a question, but I did have this question come to my mind when Suz was presenting. I know she's not here, but Irene, if you have an idea, or I know Sean is also here from FNR, one of the biggest supporters for PEP-CV, so thank you for being here, Sean. My question is that, is it possible for researchers to also access the training material for evaluators when assessing narrative CV? Because it could be a very interesting insight for researchers to get how our trainers trained and what are they assessing. So Irene, Sean, if you feel comfortable.
I can take that one, Irene, if you want, or Yes. So hi, everyone. I'm Sean. I were a program manager at the Luxembourg National Research Fund, so a funder that has implemented narrative CVs for many years now. And to answer Pooja's question, it depends. It depends on the funder, the funding agency or institution that has applied narrative CVs, and how open and transparent their documentation is. So I mean, speaking for us, all of our documentation is online on our website, so an applicant can look at the same documents and presentations that we share with the reviewers and the evaluators. So that's no issue. But I know that there's other funders that don't necessarily have that full transparency. So when in doubt, ask the funder, ask the institution. I mean, an email costs very little time, and the worst you get is a no.
Peter, you have a question?
Hi, yes. Yeah. Just wanted to ask Pooja, because you were mentioning ORCID. So how does it really work? I mean, is it possible to upload, or is there a connection with ORCID that whenever you produce something in PEP-CV, it can also, be implemented in your ORCID?
Yes, so if you are a registered member at the PEP-CV platform, you have an option to link your ORCID profile with the platform. Once you've done that, of course, it is dependent on you finishing a mentorship. So both the mentor and mentee, when they finish, you have a button where you click on it and it says mentorship concluded. And there you have, again, a consent option. Do you want to publish this on your ORCID profile? And the minute you do that, it might ask you for a login again at the ORCID profile. But if you've established the connection already, you just consent yes, and it takes you to your ORCID and you can see your contribution. And it is verified by the MCAA and PEP-CV as well. So it looks legitimate that you have contributed to a mentorship within the PEP-CV platform that is managed by the Marie Curie Alumni Association. I have a guide as well, and I can send it to you on how to step by step do this.
Other questions? Well, if that's not the case, I will hand over to Fabrice, who's going to say a few words about the breakout rooms. And I strongly encourage you to stay, because that interactive part is really helpful, and here you can discuss your questions. So Fabrice, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan. So I totally agree with what Stefan just said. So there will be a group of 2 to 3 people that will be allocated to one facilitator. So I think it would be a great opportunity to really interact with experts and to really get feedback and discuss your narrative CV. So hopefully you had time before the workshop to prepare one of the 4 modules that you were asked to prepare. Just to keep in mind a few ground rules for these breakout sessions. So since you will be sharing personal information, we ask you to keep all these discussion as confidential. Please be respectful in your discussion. The idea is to really gather constructive feedback from what you did, but also what the other person did. So we really appreciate that. And just to make sure that there will be, of course, no recording. So the presentation and the workshop so far has been recorded, but then the recording will stop now.
Yeah.